I want to talk about Chainsaw Man. I mean, seriously, at this point, who doesn't? The anime based on Fujimoto Tatsuki's hit manga is, by every metric, the most anticipated anime of the season. It's seriously not even close. I had people telling me to read this manga for months before the anime came out last month. And being the dependable and organized friend that I am, I read it, all at once, after watching the first episode. Okay, fine. But hey, at least I read it. And at least I have thoughts. And those thoughts are, among other things, it was pretty cool. I think Chainsaw Man is a perfect example of a story that suffers from its own success. Being pretty cool, in my opinion, is super impressive for a manga that I've had key moments of its narrative spoiled for me via shitty Reddit memes, and whose quality has been hyped up beyond anything that any human author could reasonably live up to. The manga is funny and fast-paced with some cool visuals. I never not had fun reading it, but to be honest, for a really long stretch of it, Chainsaw Man was just fun for me. I wasn't in that flow state where I was ravenously reading every chapter to see what happens next until around chapter 65. I mean, it's good I got to that point where I was sucked in, but spending 2/3 of a story not super sucked in, I've had better. I will say though that Chainsaw Man does one thing super well, and it does it so well that I'm super excited to write about it here. If you're a real ride or die Chainsaw Man fan, this will only make you love the story even more. I mean, I think. No promises though. Just trust me, it'll be fun either way. But first, hey new people, maybe. I'm Mo. I write about anime and other stuff. I insert politics and philosophy into it like a stuffed crust cheese pizza. I love doing this stuff, but with my job and grad school, it's hard to keep it sustainable. Check out my link tree in the description for my Patreon, or just drop a like and subscribe. If I can get this video to 70 likes, I'll know I'm on the right track. Thanks so much. Anyway, I'm spoiling all of part 1, liberally and as I see fit to make my point. I don't analyze stories linearly, at least not anymore. I instead start with the idea I want to prove and try to support it with evidence. This means that if you're thinking you can watch this video for just a little bit until you get to the part where you don't want to be spoiled, that is a bad idea. This is your only warning. There will be just spoilers for key plot points thrown in at random times from here on out. Okay? Okay. Anyway. Chainsaw Man is not just staggeringly hyped, it's also an almost suicidal gambit for Japanese animation studio MAPPA. From what I understand, they put almost all of their available liquid capital, as well as their entire junior staff on the line to make Chainsaw Man, in an unusual and lopsided deal in which the studio assumes all of the financial risks for the show. MAPPA hopes that maybe, just maybe, the financial windfall of not splitting the profits with other companies will sustain the studio for the next decade. This is insane. People often think that good art is just about passion and money, but it really isn't. Projects like this are huge logistics problems that you can't just solve by throwing money at it. If we want to judge how successful MAPPA will be, I think the best thing to do is look at what really holds this story together. I don't think it's a stretch to say that a ton of shonen are about power. It's really common in this demographic to just have stories about characters whose lives revolve around getting stronger. Just going through the shonen I've actually read or watched, if you're familiar with My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen, Fire Force, or Kill la Kill, you'll know that all of these stories feature a teenage boy, or a scantily clad teenage girl with an enormous pair of scissors in Kill la Kill's case, who has some power and who needs to get really strong at fighting to beat the bad guys that are also really strong. Not every shonen is about getting stronger. Death Note isn't about Light getting stronger, it's about the joys of intellectual masturbation. Spy Family isn't about Lloyd getting stronger, it's about found family, showing love to the people closest to you, and how neat it would be if your forger snapped my spine like a fucking twig. Rent a Girlfriend is a shonen, but that story has no real purpose other than to hurt you specifically. People often think shonen as a genre is a demographic. Anything for late teen boys to early 20s men is shonen. But most every shonen that is about power also has this getting stronger dynamic. Every shonen except for Chainsaw Man. By the time Chainsaw Man's protagonist, the titular Chainsaw Man, faces off against the main antagonist, he's considerably weaker than normal, as we'll discuss in a bit. It is in this physically weakened state that he's able to stand a chance at all. And yet, the story is intensely focused on power. The main antagonist, her name's Makima, is themed around domination and control. She spends the entire story wielding power over other things, manipulating people, brainwashing people. There's a character named Power, but I don't actually think she's super relevant here. I mean, she's obviously relevant to the story at large, but not this specific train of thought of Chainsaw Man and Power. It's funny. I came up with this thesis after seeing episode 1 of the anime. I was like, okay, let's go with the show being about power and let's just see what happens. And then I read the manga and there was a whole character named Power and I was like, oh, this must be important. I wrote it down and everything. But then she doesn't bathe or flush a toilet and then she dies. I think Power just sounds cool in Japanese. I'm oversimplifying, of course. Power is a great character. She's important to the story overall. I think if this essay was a Chainsaw Man and a human connection, or Chainsaw Man, a feminist lens, I'd incorporate Power more. But I haven't gone in that direction, so Eric Hartman, the anime girl, this essay is not. Since Chainsaw Man is about power and not about our main character, Denji, getting stronger, then that must mean that the story is operating under the assumption that power and being really strong are not actually the same thing. Makima, for example, is one of the strongest beings in the story. She can beat you up in a fight. She can take on the rulers of hell in a fight, actually, and she does. But that's not what makes her powerful, says the manga. If it were, Denji would have to become as strong as her to defeat her. But he doesn't. This is in sharp contrast to, say, My Hero Academia Stain. The character's ideology is hardly coherent, but that's less important for now. As an antagonist, he is strong, and to beat him, our main characters need to be stronger and use their powers in smarter ways to stop him. What I want to talk through today is what Chainsaw Man actually thinks power is, and why its unique conception of the concept makes it one of the cooler stories I've read in a while.
Makima-san.
Chainsaw Man is the story of Denji, a 16-year-old houseless kid trapped in a cycle of debt to the Yakuza left by his late abusive father. Denji is extremely loyal to his dominators, who task him with the dangerous work of exterminating devils, creatures from hell, born from the manifestation of human fears. He's extremely capable and efficient with his work, and earnestly believes that by putting his head down and grinding it out, he'll earn enough money to live a proper life. In practice, he bleeds more money paying interest on loans than he saves. There's a somewhat well-known line at the beginning of the story where Denji laments that he sold his entire left nut just to stay in debt. Denji's loyalty, dedication to his job, strength, and relative optimism amounts to nothing. He is still killed by his Yakuza bosses the first chance they think doing so will benefit them. Specifically, they say they want to be stronger and they want more money, so they made a deal with the devil. Denji is able to do his work thanks to his trusty pet and only friend Puchta, a half-dog, half-chainsaw devil that he encountered after Denji's abusive father died, leaving him an orphan. Despite his adorable appearance, Puchta is strong enough to let Denji kill almost any devil he wants with ease. The Yakuza sign a contract with the zombie devil, who takes control of their bodies and minds in exchange for using the power of the devil. With Denji bleeding out and chopped to bits, Puchta reveals the sentience to him. He offers Denji a contract of his own, a contract that we'll later learn is almost unique to them. Puchta will replace Denji's heart, allowing him to live again, and merging the two beings into one. In exchange, Denji just has the promise to show Puchta his dreams. We'll come back to that last bit later. With that, Denji's reborn as the titular Chainsaw Man. I just love saying the word titular. It's really fun. Don't at me. He's both the Chainsaw Devil and a human being in one. An epic zombie killing montage ensues as he hacks and saws his way through a mountain of bodies, all his former bosses, while laughing uncontrollably. Same mood. Fortunately for both its audience and someone like me who loves writing about shows, Chainsaw Man makes its thematic intentions clear right from the beginning. The Yakuza want power by making a contract with the zombie devil. As zombies, they get physically stronger, they're faster than humans would be, they're more durable, they can rip any ordinary person to shreds. But in exchange for the strength, they become slaves to the zombie devil, having lost their will and ability to reason. They are like zombies and stuff, after all. The zombie devil mocks the Yakuza, calling them stupid. Obviously, it's a bad deal for the Yakuza that they became slaves, but it's a bad deal for the Yakuza because by becoming slaves, by losing their agency, they become less powerful, not more. Power, according to Chainsaw Man, is the ability to turn a person's will into reality. Being stronger, being a more efficient fighting machine, having killed scores and scores of other beings means nothing if, at the end of the day, you cannot do what you want to do. When the Yakuza stated their desire for power and their intention of selling out Denji in exchange for that power, they did it in hopes that the physical strength of the zombie devil would allow them to manifest their desire into reality. That desire, in this case, being money. The zombie devil, controlling them like puppets instead, imposes its desire on the world instead, by controlling people through hell magic. If power were a strength, Denji at the start of the story would be one of the most powerful people in the world. He and Pochita as a team, even before their merger and the birth of the Chainsaw Man, were probably just as capable as some of the members we meet in Makima's Public Safety Devil Hunter division later in the story, a Japanese government organization officially tasked with dispatching devils. And yet, Denji is powerless. All the fighting in the world will not allow him to manifest a warm bed to sleep in at night, or a hot meal, or running water. For all Denji's capability to saw down anything standing in his way, he still doesn't have the power to pay his debt or live his life in a manner of his choosing. Denji is powerless because he is a worker under capitalism and under hierarchy. He lives in a world where basic human necessities like food, water, shelter, and an education are gatekept from people unless they sell their labor and indenture themselves towards a boss. In this case, the Yakuza. His strength in combat is nothing when faced with this class position. Let's unpin that note from earlier about Denji and his dreams. In any good shonen manga, the protagonist needs to have a goal he is set on accomplishing. A goal he is set to lay down his life for. At the start of the story, Denji has two goals. Two very grand and serious goals that he sets his heart's given new life by his only friend's sacrifice to pursuing. He wants to eat a toast with jelly on it, and he wants to squeeze some boobs. On the one hand, the manga definitely plays this up for laughs, but Chainsaw Man isn't insincere when it says Denji's two life goals are toast with jam and boobs. It's not that Denji isn't serious. He really, truly wants a woman's breast in his hand as much as Superman wants to believe in humanity, or as much as Batman wants to do right by his parents' murder. And he will, unironically, risk life and limb for it. Denji's perpetual horniness can be a turnoff for some readers and viewers. I'll admit I was skeptical too. He's at least as horny as some of the pervert side character trope progressive anime fans hate so much, but after having finished part 1, I think it works. Denji's desire for big anime titties is more like a desire for physical intimacy and emotional connection. As Denji explains, because he grew up houseless, he grew up with basically the entire world treating him like another. It is understandably difficult to even imagine approaching someone you're attracted to when you don't have a place to call your own, you smell horrible because you can't shower, and you look horrible because you're malnourished and stressed all the time. It only comes out as I want boobies because he is 16, horny, which is a normal thing to be, and didn't go to school, so therefore does not know the fancy words to express his loneliness in a nice way. On this point, it helps that the sexualization of the female characters in this story by the camera is limited. It's not like it never happens, and when it does, it's not necessarily bad. Denji's desire for bread on toast is really just a desire to eat food that tastes good. It's a desire to not be hungry all the time, to not stay up in bed because his stomach's empty, and not worry about money because he can't sleep. Power to Chainsaw Man is the ability to do what you really want. Capitalism has stripped Denji of power to the extent that the idea of condiments on plain bread is a stretch goal for him. Capitalism has isolated and alienated Denji to the point that the thought of a woman letting him touch her fills him with a determination difficult for even monks and warriors to achieve. I think one of my favorite things about how the story treats Denji is his relationship to food. He'll eat noodles even if they're soggy, which confuses Makima, who, as his boss, is much wealthier, more privileged than him. On multiple occasions, he's shown to hate it when food gets on the ground and goes to waste. I grew up middle class in the United States. My parents are African, and so grew up in the global south. When I was a kid, the unspoken rule in our house was that it was better to let food almost spoil than it was to throw it away. If the grapes go fuzzy, just throw those away and eat the good ones. If the bread gets moldy, just cut off the mold and chuck the rest in the oven. If you make dinner, you make enough for leftovers. That dinner is breakfast the next day, and dinner that night, and breakfast the day after. Have you ever ran stale bread under water and popped the whole thing in the oven to get it soft again? It works. I don't like it when people pretend or exaggerate how poor they are just because they're leftists. I didn't grow up in poverty. I just grew up with the mindset because it's easy to pass on children and difficult to unlearn. I had soup in my fridge I made like weeks ago. It's not even enough soup for a full meal, but the day I made it, my appetite wasn't cooperating and I couldn't finish it. But the idea of throwing it away gave me anxiety, and I see that in Denji, and I think that's really cool. When Makima finds Denji after having slaughtered hordes of zombie Yakuza members, she immediately hugs him. She promises to take care of him. She promises to let him eat whatever he wants. She's pretty and nice and busty. She flirts with Denji at first and later promises that she'll let him do whatever he wants with her body. Makima promises Denji that she can make his goals, his dreams come true. She promises Denji the power to live. Yes, Makima will give Denji power. Yes, she'll let Denji eat what he wants because she cares about him. She just needs him to kill a little demon first. That's not too much to ask for, right? Yes, she'll hand Denji a paycheck. You know, eventually. Just one more monster to kill and he'll be paid. Yes, she'll let Denji fondle her chest, but there's just one more itsy-bitsy life-threatening mission to go on first. Yes, she'll let Denji fuck her. All he has to do is kill the gun devil, the strongest devil ever recorded in human history, all by himself. You know? No biggie. And of course, if at any point Denji decides that he does not want to do these things, well, Makima reserves the right to kill him. He is part devil after all now. It'd be dangerous to let such a creature have agency and self-direction. What use is a dog to its owner if it lashes out? Dogs do what they're told and get food, treats, love, and attention. Dogs that don't get put down. It's simple, really. The interaction between the zombie devil and the Yakuza at the beginning of the story, where the Yakuza made a deal in hopes for power only to end up controlled and dominated, is just a reflection of what Chainsaw Man will develop as its central conflict. This is a conflict between Denji, a boy whose desire for power never extends beyond the utterly banal of basic human needs, and Makima, his groomer. When Makima gives Denji that first hug, after she finds him weak, tired, and alone in a pile of blood and rotting zombie flesh, Makima assumes the role of the capitalist hierarchs that had denied Denji power for all this time. The story makes it very clear, at least from a thematic perspective, that Makima is domination. Makima is control. Power, as I think we've seen just by thinking about this manga and anime, has a lot of different definitions. Naturally, those definitions expand even more when you talk about the real world. I think we can all agree that most significant social conflicts stem from who has power and what those with it choose to do. Anarchism is a political ideology skeptical of authority. Anarchists assert that coercion and hierarchy are at the center of most human suffering. It's tempting to believe that domination and suffering are the natural state of human beings, but anarchists insist that these things are imposed on us by those in power. The modern iterations of this domination, specifically capitalism and the nation state, are only a few hundred years old after all. Anarchists believe that it's not just possible but necessary to build a world without these attributes. This includes power structures like white supremacy and patriarchy. It includes governments and corporations, but it also includes smaller things, like the idea that someone has to be in charge in a romantic relationship, or the idea that kids are just property of their parents that can be treated however by adults. Notably, this political philosophy is both much older than and very distinct from what American conservatives would call libertarianism. Anarchism is not the idea that by getting rid of the government, the free market will magically provide for all of our needs as long as we abide by a non-aggression principle. Anarchism is the idea that all of the things that we currently rely on the state and corporate entities for, everything from roads to schools to technology to medicine to public safety, we can provide for each other ourselves. And we can provide for these services in a way that meets everyone's basic needs, all without the threat of a cop or a soldier or starving on the street to force us to do it. It's a lofty goal for sure. No one's pretending we're anywhere close to living like this, but it's something I believe in, and I've dedicated my blog and my YouTube channel in part to reading media through this framework. There's a lot of anarchist political theory that I'd love to get into one day, but this is supposed to be an anime essay, so I'll just give us a background to understand Chainsaw Man. But I also think this stuff is critical for understanding like media, politics, and the economy more broadly. In Towards an Anarchist Theory of Power, Brazilian anarchist Felipe Correa tries to synthesize a coherent definition of power by looking at two other philosophical essays, the first by another Brazilian anarchist, Tomás Ibáñez, and the second by Italian economist Amedeo Bertolo. He uses these two texts to explore various definitions of the word power to eventually create a synthesized understanding of the concept. A common thing people get wrong about anarchists is this idea that anarchists oppose power existing. Through these texts, Correa argues the opposite. Power can mean a lot of things, and many of these definitions are descriptive, meaning they simply state how things are and not the morality of that thing existing. Power can broadly refer to the capacity to do. If we take a social agent as the fundamental unit of society, power in terms of the capacity to do is just the interaction between social agents. Put another way, power in a social context is any time a person or group is able to do anything. A society without power altogether is impossible and not what anarchists advocate for. We also use the word power to refer to asymmetries in social relations. This definition is still centered around the idea of a relationship between two social agents, but we consider that the relationship is unequal over one or more axes. In a relationship between, say, a teacher and a student, when it comes to grades, the teacher has power over the student, as it's the teacher who has the final say over what the grade officially is. Power can also be considered as mechanisms of social regulation and control. Put another way, this is what someone may mean when they talk about the system. Now we're talking about relations between social agents on a macroeconomic scale. This is what we mean when we say the United States is a powerful country, for example, because it runs the world's reserve currency, because it has the world's most powerful army, because it hosts the world's wealthiest and most influential corporations, and so on. There are other definitions of power the essay mentions too, including power in the terms of the right to do something, the right to be in charge, the right to make decisions, or the right of an economic class to realize its specific interests. But we can actually boil these down into a framework that will prove useful both for Chainsaw Man and just looking at politics in general. We can break power down into 5, let's say, levels. 1, base power, the power to do something. For example, I have the power to write this essay and post it on my blog and to YouTube. I have this power because I speak and write English, and both Chainsaw Man, YouTube, and Medium are available in my language, and because I was taught how to type and use a computer at an early age. My neurotype allows me to communicate in a way people have told me they find engaging, persuasive, and informative. Social power. This is a power we wield collectively as a society via social norms. For example, your power to wear socks with sandals in public is limited given how vigorously you will be mocked for doing so. Authority. This is a power that you have that someone else in a social relation with you does not. For example, if you and Mike work in an office, but only you know how the printer works, you have the authority of printing things over Mike. Influence. Influence is a power that exists due to the fact that different people have different social characteristics and that those social characteristics interact differently in group settings. Someone who is charismatic and well-liked in our friend group will have an easier time convincing everyone that we should grab pizza for lunch than the shy guy who comes off as a bit rude. Domination. This is the power people and institutions have over others through implicit or explicit acts of violence. This is the mother who gets her kid to do his homework with the threat of a beating. This is the boss who knows he can get you to do unpaid overtime because your family needs the healthcare. This is the big country that can force a little country to pass laws the big country likes under threat of military invasion. I want to be clear that breaking these into levels is my contribution to the text. This isn't how Correa lays this out, but all these ideas are present in the text. If you'll notice, the first 4 levels are not necessarily bad things. And sometimes it's unavoidable that someone will have power in a social relation. People are different, and we're not looking for a world with perfect equality where everyone is the same. Literally 1984, 1999 communism. It's that 5th level, the domination, the violence, the coercion that we must work to reduce. In his late 2020 work on Power and Anarchist Theory of Power, Daniel Berrien, who does respectable work on YouTube as a communicator and in real life as an organizer, discusses why intuitive notions of power, explicitly ones built around physical strength, can be incomplete. He asks us to imagine a poor man who goes to prison. Through this experience, he learns how to fight and becomes extremely strong. This person would have the power to lift a heavy weight and win almost every fight he chooses. But upon leaving the prison, he would not have the power to own a yacht, attend an Ivy League school, or publish philosophy. Berrien's characterization of power in his essay is a little different than it is in mine. He focuses on what I called base power, which he defines as the ability to successfully enact one's will in order to criticize domination, which he uses the word power to describe throughout the piece. But the important thing is to be skeptical of notions of power that revolve around individual strength rather than relationships and systems. When domination becomes institutionalized within systems of society, anarchists call this hierarchy. On this point, Varian cites author Lewis Mumford and his concept of the Megamachine. As hierarchy's highest stage, the Megamachine is science, technology, and political power working together as one larger system. Each layer of the Megamachine turns people into a row of gears that turn for the benefit of the next layer up, funneling more and more power higher and higher until we reach the top layer. The layer of politicians, CEOs, and bureaucrats that are all a phone call away from controlling any resource on Earth. A few key aspects make a system a Megamachine. First, it has such a complete and total grip on the minds of its members that it becomes impossible to imagine what disobedience would even look like. The second is that despite feeling the existential dread of domination under the system, its participants somehow also believe that so long as they do not attempt to oppose the Megamachine, this domination is beneficial to them. Or at least, being dominated is better than the alternative. Makima is Chainsaw Man's Megamachine. Her total control of all things at a global scale is there from the beginning, but revealed in small, measured steps. It starts with her leading public safety. It starts with being in a position of authority. It starts with her picking up Denji like a stray dog and manipulating him with treats and promises. It starts with Denji's co-worker and eventual friend, Aki, liking her. It starts with Makima using this crush to make sure Aki stays in line. But then her powers seem to grow. Inexplicably, we are shown Makima can control rats and other small animals. We aren't told how, but we're told that this means she can hear any conversation anyone under her may be having in order to try and subvert her authority. We're then shown that even against the most powerful devils in hell, Makima has power over that too. By the final arc of part 1, we're told that the world's most powerful governments, from Japan to the USSR to the United States, all fear her. Makima has never once known something not going her way. Makima, as it turns out, is a devil herself. She's the control devil. And let me just say, this reveal drove me nuts. Not because I was surprised. No, if you look at Chainsaw Man through this lens, it is almost inevitable that Chainsaw Man go in this direction. I was happy because, well, I like being right. But also, okay. I feel like, due to memes about 12th grade English class and how the curtains were fucking blue, people think that the point of media analysis is to guess what the author was thinking or to find the hidden meaning. So when I say that Chainsaw Man has an anarchist conception of power, there will be many people who think what I am saying is Fujimoto Tatsuki, author of Chainsaw Man, is actually an anarchist, and I know this because I read his manga. Or worse, the things that I, Mo Blacklake, happen to agree with me politically. No. I can't claim to understand what Fujimoto was thinking when he wrote this story. Actually, I don't think anyone can claim to understand Fujimoto at all. This is a man who heard himself on camera attempting to levitate. For all I know, this whole anarchist power thing could have been a big accident. Maybe Chainsaw Man simply exists to fuel Fujimoto's well-documented Dami-Mami fetish. Is Chainsaw Man a deep exploration into the cycles of trauma and poverty caused by a society based on domination and social hierarchy? Or is it an electrifying tale by a very horny man who really should just get stepped on by a woman in a suit already? You know, who's to tell? All media analysis ever claims to do is offer a reading of a text that has explanatory power for the text. A reading of a text is a framework that helps you understand why the story is organized the way it is. I'm saying that an anarchist reading of Chainsaw Man does a lot to this end, to the point where you can even predict entire plot points in advance. I think most people's experience with Makima is to start the story by thinking she's nice for giving Denji things like food, money, and affection, maybe even shipping her with Denji for a bit, before growing increasingly suspicious of her, and finally hating her when she goes full villain mode at the end. I never had this experience because I never trusted her. And it's not because I'm smarter than everyone. I mean, okay, I am smarter than everyone, but it has nothing to do with Chainsaw Man. Hahaha. Seriously, though, it's because if you look at Chainsaw Man as a story about power and domination, Makima, who from the very beginning only ever just replaced Denji's debt domination with a wage slavery domination and threats, can't possibly turn out to be the good guy. I mean, she can, I guess. And there are plenty of stories that do this kind of thing, where they'll obviously have an oppressed character and an oppressive character, but the oppressors and cops will get the redemption arcs, and the marginalized characters will be treated like villains. It's My Hero Academia. My Hero Academia. The story I'm talking about is My Hero Academia. Sorry for acting like it could be anything. It's My Hero Academia. As the control devil, it's revealed that Makima has the ability to manipulate anybody who thinks that they are beneath her. It's revealed that Aki's crush on Makima was an idea she implanted within him the moment he saw himself as a worker and her as his boss. The moment Aki saw himself as subservient to someone else is the moment he lost. Until that moment, Makima has Denji and Aki's division of public safety on a mission to kill the gun devil. Since, presumably, guns are one of the scariest things humans have ever made, remember it is not an American that wrote this, the gun devil is very strong. It goes into churches and workplaces and schools and kills untold numbers of people. Remember, it is not an American that wrote this. Makima tells them that the gun devil went missing, but that its pieces are scattered around the world wreaking havoc. She tells them it's up to them to stop it, only to later turn around and say that the real situation is that Japan, the US, and USSR have split the gun devil amongst themselves, and Makima wants the Japanese government to have the entire thing to wield as an imperialist weapon. By this point, Denji is too obsessed with the idea of maybe one day getting his dick wet to say no, and Aki at this point is too attached to Denji in power to let them fight the gun devil by themselves. Unbeknownst to Denji, Makima uses a piece of the gun devil to possess Aki and set him loose on a killing spree. She tells Denji to kill his friends, and he does. At Makima's apartment, Denji reveals that he's depressed. He tells Makima that he finds thinking for himself, having agency in his own decisions, to be exhausting. He tells her that he believes his life would be easier if he was Makima's dog. Makima, he reasons, cares about him. She's smarter than him too. He thinks that giving up his agency and barking woof in response to whatever she says is a better deal than navigating the complexities of life on his own. And so, having signed away control over his own life, Makima kills Denji's only friend left in the world, power, because, well, she can. Remember what I said about the characteristics of the Megamachine? The Megamachine abuses the insecurity we all have, that we're not smart enough or capable enough to manage our own lives, that we therefore need to be dominated and abused to survive. The suffering Makima causes, and the suffering the Megamachine causes, is not a huge secret. Denji himself knew for a fact that Makima would kill power before she did, but he let her anyway. You will notice that the characteristics of an abusive parent or partner and the characteristics of the Megamachine are one and the same. Makima is just as much a representative of all of global capitalism as she is the most intimate form of abuse a human can experience, because they all operate under the same principle: domination and control. Just as our society convinces us that without a cop to beat us at a traffic stop, or without 3 billionaires owning all of communication, or without a state controlling our bodies, our gender, or our sexuality, the world would fall into chaos, Makima convinces Denji that without her whispering in his ear while she does whatever she wants to him, he will never have the strength to face life on his own. Will the anime keep this level of thematic care and thoughtfulness? I'll be honest, I'm not convinced. The manga's levity and snappy writing really got me through most of the beginning of Chainsaw Man, but the anime seems to want to take itself super seriously. I don't care about fights, I don't care for blood, I don't like the characters, yet anyway. So this anarchist thematic beat around domination is like it for me. MAPPA, meanwhile, seems to be dismantling the early seeds the manga placed for this stuff. They removed the scene where Makima forces Denji to fight a devil on an empty stomach for food. It served as an early warning that Makima's love for Denji is conditional on total obedience, but without it, Makima looks sympathetic. And the more sympathetic Makima feels, the less Chainsaw Man's analysis of power actually works. She's not a good person with a dark side, she's a groomer who's good at hiding it. There's also a small panel where Denji is singing about a union job and paid time off, but it's gone from the anime.
Wow, 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 wow.
The Denji is obsessed with boob stuff only works if it's used in a lighthearted way of saying that Denji is abused, touch-starved, and craves attention. If it's played straight, like the anime does, for no reason, it's just bad and uncomfy. I can't guess if Chainsaw Man will be financially successful. I'm not a market analyst and I don't have the data. I'm also not saying the anime is wholly bad or doomed to fail. It's still one of the best anime airing in fall 2022. What I am saying is that if the anime fails, it will be because MAPPA unraveled the thematic nucleus that holds the story together, choosing instead to focus on aesthetics that matter less. If you made it this far into the video, it's probably safe to say you love deep dives and the intersection of media, politics, and culture. My Discord community is a chill, progressive space where you can talk about this kind of stuff with just loads of cool people. We also do anime group watches, esports, and other community events. Check out my link tree in the description. There's one more thing I want to talk about. The actual ending to part 1. See, the Chainsaw Man is a little special because when it eats a devil, it erases the concept of what it ate from existence until people become afraid of that concept again. After that, that concept will be reborn as a new, considerably weaker devil version of its former self. Makima wanted to isolate Denji until he was obedient to her as the Chainsaw Man. With the Chainsaw Man's power under her control, she can erase any concepts she deems unsuited for the perfect world she aspires to create. There's a funny bit towards the end where Denji asks Makima if, in her perfect world, bad movies would exist. She says no, and Denji says she has no choice but to kill her. At this point, Denji has saved so many people from the devils Makima sent after him that the world sees him as a hero. Chainsaws have become a symbol of hope. No one's afraid of chainsaws anymore, so he's weak. Makima's weakness turns out to be the very thing that makes her an effective dominator. She views her victims in terms of their use to her end goal. She doesn't see others as people. Literally. Makima's eyesight is quite bad. She's a little face blind and instead recognizes people by smell. After all the time Denji and Makima spent together, flirting, the movie dates, and fighting alongside each other, Makima never bothered to memorize Denji's scent. She only memorized the scent of who she found useful to her, Pochita. So by temporarily separating himself from Pochita, his own heart, Denji is able to just kill Makima by sneaking up behind her. I think the saddest panel in the manga is this one here, where Denji admits that even after knowing what she's done, he still likes Makima. Real abuse makes it difficult to unlearn the love for your abuser that you were forced to have. The ending's anticlimactic, but in a good way, if that makes sense. Unlike other stories where power is defeated by accumulating more power, domination in Chainsaw Man is defeated by exploiting its one weakness, that it can't see people as people, only tools. So dominators always underestimate the ability of people to work together. After this, Pochita explains that all devils have a desire that is incompatible with their essence. As the Chainsaw Devil, Pochita wanted desperately to hug someone. But of course, who will hug a being made out of blood and violently rotating blades? It was his chance encounter with Denji that made his dream come true. Likewise, Makima truly desired a world of equal social relations, but she couldn't do that because all she knew how to do was dominate others through manipulation, fear, and violence. Her dream of a better world was impossible because her means of doing so were incompatible with her ends. When Denji eats Makima, like he literally fries up her titty meat and eats it with rice, after having refused with Pochita, Denji temporarily erases the concept of control and domination from human consciousness. For a brief moment, Denji creates a world that anarchists, among others, spend their lives fighting for, a world governed through equality and not domination. Of course, someone becomes afraid of domination again, so a new control devil is born, as a child by the name of Nayuta. The child is entrusted to Denji. Pochita begs Denji to make Makima's dream come true. A lot of stories have characters that fight for equality, but go about it the wrong way. They are more obsessed with the fear of becoming too radical than actually changing the status quo. Chainsaw Man avoids this trap altogether. Pochita shows Denji that there is a right way to fight for equality, and it is worth fighting for. He instructs Denji to start by treating people with kindness instead of abuse. And you know what? I won't analyze that. I think this panel speaks for itself. So yeah, Chainsaw Man is pretty cool.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!